Okay, picture life before 1970. Some of you can picture this. Some of you have to imagine this. That's okay. In 1970, the world changed, and not just because disco, but in 1970, the world changed, and something is now ubiquitous. Does that mean everywhere and we don't pay attention to it? Okay. There is something in our world that is everywhere and actually a little bit taking over that wasn't here before 1970. Anyone want to take any guesses? You. Ladies and gentlemen, Ron, this is, okay, all right, we're going to be this way today. All right. Anything besides Ron, because you're not everywhere, although, Cell phones. Personal computers. Anyone else? Rick, are you Googling it right now to see? Oh, okay. No, it's fine. My work here is done. So for communion now, no, I'm just kidding. That would be so much fun to do that some Sunday. Just there's your opening and let's close. So in 1970, that we take the world for granted came in, and history has never been the same. So actually in the 60s, a guy named Jim Knopp was building apartments in the Bay Area around San Francisco. And as he was building these apartments, this developer, he realized that folks who were moving into these apartments were running into trouble, that in the in-between, they didn't have anywhere to put their stuff. And then as he kind of looked into this even more, he realized it wasn't just people who were living in confined spaces of apartments didn't have enough room for their stuff. He realized, actually, there's a bit of a need for this. And so in 1970, he purchased a small piece of land in Alameda, and he built California's first self-storage. And so, boy, that would have been good to get on the ground floor of, right? Yep. Now I know it's a little like the room's wondering, am I going to make fun of self-storage? Because some of us have self-storage, and just settle down. So he built the first, and then he built another, and he built another, and he built a ton of them. People around him said nobody's ever going to pay money just to use a 10 by 10 shed to store stuff. Nobody has that amount of stuff. And in just a few weeks, though, he had rented out all of the units that he owned, and then he opened those others, Berkeley, San Pablo, others, on and on and on. And actually, he made thousands of these in Southern California, up and down the coast. And he made millions, of course, because we have a lot of stuff. And so, I don't know about you. Don't worry. I don't know about you, but there's actually something fun to me about the idea of moving into new space because of the limitations in the space. As a kid, any of you move bedrooms in the house, trade with a brother or a sister just for the fun of it? No? Really? A couple of us, right? Okay. Any of you, the room you had was the room you always had? Okay. All right. Let's really divide the room. Those of you who've lived in your house more than 5 years, how many of you have not changed your living room layout in those 5 years? Really, us? That's not true. No, it's not. We just got a sectional. So for our next series, we'll be going through relationships. Really, the section that counts? Okay, we'll talk. So in my mind, we've changed this. I was team, okay, so who you've changed it in the 5 years, or you get jazzed or energy by the thought of changing it around. And okay, right, Now, some are like, I've changed it because I had to. The couch got the thing and the whatever. And others of you like, no, there is goodness, and I nailed this in the very beginning, and it will be like this until Jesus comes. I get it. I get it. Right? Oh, okay. All right. So to me, there's always this bit of energy that comes in moving a space. It was moving a dorm or moving a bedroom or moving houses, of course, but even in moving churches, spaces, right? We were in the Women's Center for a season, and then we were on Main Street in the third floor studio, and then the heater moved, and so we moved the heater broke, so we moved to a different part of the building. And then we were in the atrium and City Center for a minute. And then we were on the first floor of Main Street, the whole of it. And then we had to move the kids upstairs. And with each one of those new moves, there was the like, so how should we set things up? And how should we do this and whatever? Unless you've built a house, where you are is not meeting every single one of your needs. Even those of you who just have closed on a house, you're probably finding like, this is exactly what I need, except, right? And when we moved into this space as a church, it's everything we needed. It's exactly what we need, except there's no great like gathering space. Like we don't have a foyer or a vestibule or an entrance or whatever. So what do? We pivot and we just, oh, well, that is in here. And if you need a cup of coffee, go get a cup of coffee. And 99.9% of the time, totally fine, right? But we've all been in a service. It's just us, friends. We've all been in a service where somebody forgot we were in a church service as they were getting the coffee. And it was fine. The world didn't end. Church didn't like, oh, we're done. We figured it out and we worked it out. Larry Osborne, who is the teaching pastor that we're using the video series on Wednesday nights during the Bible study, wrote a book called Sticky Teams and Sticky Church. And in Sticky Church, he talks about one of the downfalls in church world is that we believe a lot of things that aren't true, and we believe them until we hear them said out loud, and because we haven't really thought about them. And it's not like Jesus is God kind of things, but things like, hey, you need to focus on your weaknesses so that you can grow in your weaknesses. And Osborne was the first pastor that I ever heard go, you know what, church, ignore your weaknesses. Those things that you're not good at, that you can't do anything about, ignore them. Rather than looking at them week after week, oh my word, I wish we had a foyer. Oh my word, I wish we had a foyer. Oh my word, I wish we had a foyer. Or oh my goodness, I wish we had a gym because then the kids could really run. Or like, it's not for lack of looking around our facilities and going, boy, it would be nice if we. It's we can't and we don't, so what do we? And it's interesting that this idea of self-storage, it's a little bit of that in the beginning for his renters, and as a developer, let's not romanticize this, he looked for a very lucrative revenue stream. But it was this limitation. There's a limitation on the space people are living in. Without like, oh, you just need a bigger space, focus in on something else. And see, I think it's great in church world. One, it keeps us from doing ministry from a place of discontent. Oh, if we had such and such, then we could really. The church I was born into as a kid was a great church, built in the 50s, you know, kind of the typical, stereotypical church. Sanctuary upstairs, classrooms downstairs. It had a gym and all this stuff. But at some point, someone in that church world thought, this isn't enough. And it wasn't because we were multiple services or busting at the seams or any of those things. It was just, this isn't enough. And then what happened is at that church, then it began to really focus in on, we need more space because we're in the city. And the church actually bought houses around the church. And I wasn't old enough to give any thought to this. We were there up until I was about 12 or 13 years old. But I can remember 10, 11, 12, 13 before we moved churches, this seems like it's a really important thing. And we're buying these houses, but what is the church doing with these houses? And the church never tore down a single one of those neighborhood old church houses. The church never expanded, it never moved. It focused so much in on we don't have enough that it lost the plot. And that's just my take on it. The adults in the room back in that day may have a different perspective on that or whatever. But there's something right in not focusing in on your weaknesses that you can't do anything about. It's the church plant that is going to be meeting in a mobile site for the foreseeable future because of property or because of whatever. Rather than focusing in on what they're not, what are they? Well, they're nimble, they're this, they're that. And so that's been a characteristic of Water City all along the way. It's not that we aren't aware of the things that maybe are weaknesses. It's just to focus in on those is the wrong direction. And this morning as we wind down Ecclesiastes, I think this is the end. Although it's not all of Ecclesiastes, right? There's more in there we haven't touched. Amy reminded me this week of something that's true. If you were to go to Israel and you go to one of the archaeological sites, it's not completely cleaned out and dug to the bottom. And one of the reasons for that is they want to leave space in these sites for the next generation of archaeologists, and then the next generation, and the next generation. And there's a little bit of that sometimes in these studies and walks that we do through books, especially Ecclesiastes. We are not digging to the bedrock of Ecclesiastes. And so I hope that in these areas where we haven't touched, you continue to study, but also that you've got a lay of the land in this sense of there are multiple viewpoints in Ecclesiastes. There's multiple floors of the building. The first floor is the teacher looking out on the world and going, this is meaningless. It's hevel. It's just chasing after the wind. But that there's that second level, right, where those same things, when seen not for what they are going to give me, but seen as a gift from God, it changes how we interact with them and even what we expect from them. If I'm looking at a relationship off of what I am going to get from it, it's not going to be long until that relationship is meaningless or hevel or not able to give what I say it needs. But if I look at that same relationship and go, you know what, this is a gift from God, and I'm treating it as gift, thankful for it, all of the things that a gift is different than a thing that is earned or deserved. Well, then it's not meaningless. It's not maybe any less difficult, but it has worth and value. And so anyway, those ideas are the things that hopefully as you're moving through Ecclesiastes, even beyond this series, that you'll have in mind. This morning, we're closing with this idea of limitations as a gift. Our limitations are a gift. You ever been in a group with somebody who didn't know where they started or stopped? I mean, physically, there's some disorders of people struggle with knowing where their actual body stops. Kids, as they go through a growth spurt, have gotten used to who they used to be in their body, and they've hit this growth spurt, and now their body's different than that. There are some people that don't know where they just end, and those are the people that when you're in a group, they're always bumping into you. And if you don't go, oh, nobody's ever bumping, you're that person. And it's not a bad thing. It's just there is this awareness as we are maturing, or as it's helpful in society to know where you end and where other people begin. It's the thing we try and teach kids, right? You don't hit because that's where they start, and this is where you... And each of us, we have these. In space world, it can be fun. What are the limitations of the living room? How are you going to set things up? If it's a new house, what are you going to do with your furniture? How are you going to facilitate conversation? Or does it center around the fireplace, or is it the TV? Is it just about facing all the furniture to each other, so when you have people in the room, you can look deeply into each other's souls and talk? Or do you need to have that Xbox there so that, what are the limitations in the room, and how are you going to set it up? Ecclesiastes is this reminder to us of that there are limitations, and that they're a gift. So, I didn't put the image in. So if you were to Google real quick, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, or I can do all things through him who gives me strength, you're going to get a Google image search, and it's going to be just thumbnail after thumbnail of the verse. Probably not both of those, depending on which one. We usually default to this one because I can do all things is better than I can do all this through him. The way the NIV translates the Greek in this, the I can do all this, is a little bit closer to reminding us of what the all this is. I can do all things goes on t-shirts, stickers, bumper stickers, sayings in our houses better because we get to bring to it the all this or all things, right? And then, depending on your translation, and we love the passage in Church World, it applies to so much. It's after a sports win. It's after some big life victory. It's after the things that really turn around for us. Or it's looking at those and we say this. Or it's to inspire someone to see the good that's just in front of them if they really put their shoulder to it, because Jesus is also going to really put his shoulder to it with them, right? That's what it is, but it's more than just you can do this because God's got you. What Paul's saying to the church in Philippi, and if you've got your Bible, Philippians chapter 4, we're going to bounce in this a little bit. We don't usually do this, but we don't have a ton of time for the whole of it. So these are the verses we're going to grab, verse 1, and then 8 through 9, and then 11 through 13. So here's where this lives contextually. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, to whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord in this way, dear friends. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is loving or lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put those into practice, and the peace of God, or the God of peace, will be with you. Verse 11. I'm not saying this because I'm in need. In that space in between there, he's like, thank you for your generous offering to the work of the ministry. And he goes, this is met need, da-da-da. And he goes, hey, I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. That's a very different than just holding it up at the end of a game and going, I can do all things through Christ. It's not untrue I can do all things through Christ, but what Paul's specifically saying is, whatever situation I find myself in, if I have enough, if I don't have enough, if I am full or if I'm hungry, I can go through whatever it is because of who Jesus is, who gives me strength. Now, that might feel like not that big of a thing, but if I'm wielding this as a promise that God will do for me the thing, that's not what Paul's saying. What he's reminding us of is wherever we find ourselves, wherever he found himself, he pursued contentment. Contentment. And so whether it was a lot or whether it was a little, whether he had enough or he didn't have enough, I know I've had seasons in my life that have gone off the rails because I've looked at my need rather than going, how can I be content in this space? And it's one thing if it's just a little bit. If you got just a little bit more, then you could upsize the meal instead of just getting the meal, right? It's another when it's like, actually, I'm hungry. And Paul's reminding, actually, in that space, learn to be content, which is weird because if we pull the camera further back, we know that God invites us to pray and ask when we have needs. So it's not just that God's going, well, you know what, wherever you are, there you are, deal with it. Because he does invite us in those spaces where we are hurting, where we are lonely, where we have not enough, where fill in the blank on the need. The space where we are supposed to be is a contented discontent. It is a, God, you are with me. I can go through this because of you. But God, this is also not where I want to be. So I am going to move through this with you. Help me to be content in this space. Help me to see you at work. Help me to, God, this is a gift. And as hard as it is to think that. And it's not a gift maybe for the reasons I say it is, or that I feel like I need to be super spiritual to make it. Oh, how are you? Well, I'm in need, but praise God. No, like this is a difficult space, but I'm trying to trust God more in it. And so I'm trying to see this as the gift that it is, knowing that, that it might, okay. So some, though, say that the gift of limitations is that where we end is where God begins. That's the kind of thing we say in church world. And you know what's really toxic about saying that? Not the God part. It's the me part. The me part is I am going to do this all the way to the space that I can't do anymore, and then that's where God takes over. God doesn't start anywhere. I end. He's already been. He is. And so when my shallow, flabby dime store theology says, I will do this as far as I can do it, and then when I can't do anymore, then God will begin. You know what it does? It makes the things that I am praying for seem pretty like, well, I've done my best, so I guess I'm going to pray. Prayer is never the last resort. Prayer is the beginning of it all. And there isn't anything that I should be doing where I'm not like, God, this is your will. And, I know you are at work in this space. It's not God, some Greek God, there in the pantheon of gods going, well, do as much as you're going to do. Let me know when you can't do anymore. Then I'll get involved. Think about all of the movement of life. It is sustained because of who God is. How incredibly silly is it that we say things like, where you end, God begins. And so, all right, Ecclesiastes 9, how are we doing? We're doing great. Ecclesiastes 9, 7 through 10. This is the teacher, again, observing the world. He's like, so go eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for God has already approved what you do. That right there could be a verse that gets a lot of people in a lot of trouble, right? Go do what you're going to do. Do it with gladness because God's already approved what you're going to do. That probably is worth like sitting with somebody and talking about it with them if you're making a life choice. Don't just grab Ecclesiastes 9:7 and be like, I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do because God's already approved it. First of all, it's Kohelet, the teacher. He's not like, always saying the right, best thing. But that said, always be clothed in white and always anoint your head with oil. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life. Hey, hon, let's go out date night, this meaningless life, probably not going to be the best way to go out the door. But not wrong. So all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days, okay, we get it. For this is your lot in life, and in your toilsome labor under the sun, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For in the realm of the dead where you are going, there is neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom. Are you like, this is just right on brand for the teacher for what we've been moving through Ecclesiastes. There's wisdom and truth in what he's saying, and pessimism. Now, we are going to unpack that in a smidge. But what if our limits and our boundaries and our smallness aren't flaws to fix, but gifts to receive? Your limits are intended by God. Now, we're not going to do this and unpack this, but not every limit is we're not going to get into the theology of sin and the theology of like when Adam and Eve disobeyed God, bit from the fruit that he said you shouldn't, and he goes, well, you were going to live forever, but now you're going to die. Like, those aren't the limits that I'm talking about. It's the limits that we feel like we can rage against. And actually, death is one of the ones that we feel like we can rage against, if we're being totally honest. I'm talking about other limits in our lives. And we're going to look at this, but those limits of your time and your strength and your money, limits of your attention, limits of your passion, limits of when you look around the world and you see just how broken it is and you feel like there's nothing you can do on the grandest scale, those limits, those things are intended by God. From the very beginning, God built limits into his creation. I know Job's tricky, but this is the part of Job where God is speaking to Job, going, hey, big guy, you think you know how the world is and you think you know how the world should work, and your friends have been blowing a lot of words. Let me talk to you for a second. And in the context of those last chapters of the book of Job, which are spaces of such worship, if you feel small in a big world, or if you feel big in a small world, reading through these last chapters of the book of Job reorients us and sets us in the right space. Because, see, all the voices are telling us, go change the world. We talked about that last week. Or they're telling us there's nothing you can do because the world is meaningless. Ecclesiastes lives in that space. Job lives in that space. And here's God's words, some of God's words to Job. Hey, who shut up the sea behind the doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in its thick darkness, when I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place, when I said, this far you may come and no farther. Here is where your proud waves halt. Where were you when I did that, God says? You ever want to feel small, sit at the shore of whatever body of water. Winnebago will do it, but Lake Michigan's gooder. Sit at the edge of somewhere that there's water. And then think back to the last time you had your garden hose and flooded something in your yard. And then think about this water only goes this far. Now, we could be silly and go, well, Winnebago is as big as it is because of the lock and dam system up in Neenah. This is a mill pond. When it was original, this was way more marshy. And it is what it is because man and woman stopped the water up in Neenah to be able to harness that water to run the mills that the industries up in Neenah and Appleton and all the way down the river into the Bay of Green Bay. We did that, not God. But we didn't do Lake Michigan. We didn't do the Pacific. We didn't do the Gulf of Mexico. We didn't do. And so those are the spaces where we are reminded of who God is and what he has done. Have you ever given just a second of thought to, isn't it cool that the world's this big and not that big? Because it could be that big, but it's this big. Why? Because God went, that's as big as it needs to be. Some of the fascinating things, not like proving creation or any of that kind of thing, but is the unique makeup of who and what we are. One of the things that just fascinates me is that the amount of time it takes from your eye to switch from color to black and white, from the rods to the cones, is the same amount of time it takes after the sun goes down for the world to go dark. It's why it's so disorienting after you've got your night vision. If one of your buddies comes up with their camera flashlight, hey, how you doing? What's going on? It's because those don't flip on and off. And in the dark, your eyes have adjusted to take in as much light as they possibly can. But in the daytime, those things that are used at night aren't necessary in the day. Now, that seems like some pretty good design. Or a thing that happened it doesn't matter. It's just amazing. And to me, however you begin your story of humanity being on the earth, whichever narrative you use, it still points to God at work. And see, that's what God's doing here in Job. Hey, Job, big man on campus. You've got some pretty big things to say and charges against me because life's unfair. Hey, where were you when I this? And the beauty in this is that it reminds us we're small, but it reminds us that God is big. And so my limitations are intended by God. Our limits are not evidence of sin always. They're a part of God's good design. You're finite. That's okay. God is infinite. We live within time. God is in it and outside of it. We live within bodies that wear out. His strength never fades. We see in part. He sees in whole. We embrace that truth. When we do, we stop trying to play God and start trusting him. We have limitations. And see, our limits were meant to drive us to worship. Our limits were meant to drive us to worship. You ever been somewhere at a museum? Let's go back. You ever been to a museum with somebody who's not quite into art yet? And you walk through a gallery and they go, I could do that. And you're like, right? Anyone done that? Anyone said that? I've said it. Or my big art fail, it's not all wins for Jay, is going to the museum at a time where Amy's trying to limit screens in our house, and I go, hon, these are all screens. And she was like, they're a little different. But that person who walks in there, and okay, I get it. Some art, our family just went to Milwaukee and went through. What a fun museum that one is. Renaissance and ancient, new, modern. But I'll be honest, there was one, I went into it and I'm like, I could do that one for sure. And then what needed to be said to me wasn't, but if I worked there, and you know they hear it, but you didn't. You could do it, but you didn't. And see, there's something about the folks who don't want to recognize their limitations, will go into any setting and will go, I could do that. And see, the reality is that I don't have any paintings in any museums besides my mom's fridge. And I guess that's not meaningless. But this reminder to us, if I'm carrying around an attitude, but I could do that, rather than, God, I can't do that. God, I'm not supposed to do that. Then I'm walking into how many scenarios where instead of humbly being thankful or worshipful or whatever, I'm walking into that setting with pride. And you know where the most dangerous space is with this? You and I cannot ever save ourselves. But if it's salvation is a bit modern art to me and I don't quite get it, but I walk into the gallery and I'm like, I could fix myself. I could save myself. I could do this. God, the curator, the artist, is just sitting there going, you can't. But man, this is gift, so just receive it. Take your picture next to it. Get your nose right up close to it. In fact, touch it and let it change you. And so recognizing my limitations and coming to God, it's why there's scripture that is like reminding us of who God is. And one of the giant ones is just be still and know that I'm God. And so our limitations are meant to drive us to worship, but it doesn't always get there in a straight line. Ecclesiastes 3, 9 through 14. What do workers gain from their toil? I've seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He's made everything beautiful in its time, and He set eternity in the human heart. Nobody can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there's nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is a gift from God. Second floor. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing taken from it. God does this so that people will fear Him. The beginning of knowledge is the fear of God. Now, fear is a tricky word, and we don't have time to all the way unpack this morning. But this isn't fear run away from the guy in the hockey mask who's going to kill you fear. This is a fear that draws you to move toward it. And so it's fear bigger than awe, but it is awe. It's fear that's bigger than I'm terrified, and yet it is terror. It's fear that reminds us of the thing that we are fearful of is absolutely in love with us and has our best in mind. When I am not sitting with my limitations, I am not sitting with the reality of who God actually is. The God who is present right now in that hospital room with my friend where nobody knows what the answer is. And I am feeling all of this unsettled because I want to know. I need to figure it out. Are you kidding me that they can't just run the right test? God is. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to work the way or follow this path that I'm going to tell God what to do. My fear of God is an awe that draws me towards Him. It's Isaiah saying, woe to me, I'm undone. I'm in your presence. My prayer, I think we've all felt that. Sometimes we wrongly attribute it to vertigo or some other sense. Have you been small in a space where you were aware of something so much bigger than you? Not because of the smoke or the lights or the deep bass from the subwoofers, but because for that moment, eternity was thin and you were aware of God in ways that you probably couldn't talk about or give words to, in ways that actually, if you were to communicate it, would lessen it because it would sound cliche, or we didn't have the ability to even convey what we were experiencing. That, friend, is the fear of God. And it's not because of some manipulation of a speaker or a chord progression, the mixture of the colors that trigger just the right thing. It's the presence of God, who does not begin where we end. There is nowhere he is not, and there is nothing he is incapable of doing. And he's at work whether I want him to be or not. God does it so that his people will fear him. Which, depending on your backstory and the authorities in your life, could feel hard or unsafe. And in a sense, I guess this is Narnia. He's not a tame lion. And so I want to be reminded of that. And one of the giant ways I do that is not in a like, Jay, you're the worst, Blaise Pascal. If people would just realize they're a worm, it would be so much better. He goes, but if we only knew our wretchedness without also knowing how incredibly loved we were, all we would have is despair. But Pascal's right when he says we are wrong if we only know how loved we are, because then we're the prancing pony. But we're wrong if we only think we're wretched. You are a filthy worm. So am I. And yet loved enough that the creator of heaven and earth, the only rescue plan that could redeem you was death. Not for someone else, a goat, a sheep, a cow, himself, so that we might have life. So we be still and we know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Psalm 46 is a beautiful psalm of God's awesomeness. Raging against the nations, breaking the weapons. And what does he call? He calls us to be still. Our limits remind us of our weakness. 2 Corinthians, again, back into Paul. In 2 Corinthians 12, he says, even if I choose to boast, he's in this space where they're like, you're not really an apostle because like the other ones drive better cars, would be the modern equivalent. The other ones have more followers. The other apostles, they don't act like you, talk like you. You talk a big talk, but as soon as you walk in the room, Paul, you're actually really quiet. And so Paul goes, he throws himself under the bus. He goes, even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool because I would be speaking the truth. But I refrain so that no one will think more of me than is warranted by what I do or what I say, or because of these surpassingly great revelations. He's like, I'm holding back from you all. Therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, he knew himself, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan. We usually just talk about the thorn in the flesh. That next bit, it's a little much. To torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. This is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecution, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Why? Philippians 4. Because he can go through all those things because of who Christ is in him. This would be a fun place to do a survey on the screen. 1 star, don't want to talk about it. 5 stars, killing it. How good did you receive these things in your life this week? I'll just do me. I subbed this week. Last week, I subbed middle school. Didn't do so amazing at getting insulted by 8th graders. And we're in that space, right? I will lean into it. Earlier in this same passage, Paul says, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. Do you know when Paul wrote this? The first century. Do you know what the first century isn't? The clay age. This isn't the well, you've got the Iron Age, and then you've got the Bronze Age, and then you've got the Stone Age, and then you've got the Clay Age. When Paul was writing this, they had better containers than just jars of clay. And so in our context, I don't know what he would say, styrofoam, doggy bags from the all-you-can-eat, the thing, the Pyrex somebody gave to you that's chipped. You are an imperfect vessel. You are a clay jar. Now, clay jars hold some amazing things. Hello, Dead Sea Scrolls. But the scrolls weren't amazing because of the jars. And so in your life, when was the last time you looked in the mirror and was like, I'm a jar of clay? And clay jars chip and crack. Sometimes they break. Now, God can bring those back together with beauty. A couple years ago, the Advent box, where we looked at that Japanese art of using gold to reform broken pottery, is the most perfect example of what God does in our lives. And I would have got one of those for each of us, but we don't have the budget. You are broken pottery reformed with gold. For the teacher, limits mean meaningless. Kohelet looks at his life and he goes, I'm working so hard, I'm going to die, I'm going to will my stuff to somebody that doesn't care. I'm working so hard, what difference does it make? I'm going to have the meal, and then I'm done with the meal because I'm hungry again. The king is going to do what the king is going to do, no matter what I say. It's meaningless. I am limited. I am finite. I cannot. But see, for us, it points to this deeper meaning. He longed for what we have in Christ. Jesus stepped into the limits of our world, into our time, into our fragile human bodies, into our suffering, and he brings purpose into that. When he died on the cross, he took on the ultimate limit. See, our mortality reminds us of resurrection hope. Our exhaustion points to God's rest. Our need for grace reminds us of his endless supply. You feel a little thin? Like too much butter spread over toast? Thin? You're supposed to. You're supposed to. Because see, we work our tail off 6 days a week. And then that seventh, we rest. Because that's what God said to do, and that's what we're supposed to do. And some of us, we are at the end of ourselves because you haven't rested. When is the last time you shut your stupid phone off? You are not omniscient. You are not omnipresent. You are not necessary. I'm not very smart, but I used to get into such trouble in Bible college when someone would go, is that necessary? And I'd say, the only thing that's necessary is God. Like, Jay, you're so smart. It was a quip, but it's true. So I scroll my screen because I'm afraid of missing out on what you're doing. Or I get back into the news because I got to know. You know, so much of our unrest is you're not supposed to know. But Jay, no, you are limited. I know our society and our culture is different than the ancient world. Representative society, all the things that weren't then. Listen. Vote, don't vote, do your thing, then get back to life. Pray for those who are in authority. Then pursue the peace and the good of your city. Plant the garden. Do all the things of Jeremiah 29. Not the "for I know the plans" part, but the other part, which is the actual direction to those in exile, us. Work for the good of your city. Pray for, do marriages, build houses, plant gardens, be present, do good things. And it's all redeemed because of what Jesus does on the cross. The teacher says there's no point to this. Jesus says, I've come that you might have life and have it to the full. Admitting and embracing our limits is freeing. Admitting and embracing your limits is freeing. Now I get it. Okay, if we had a Sunday night service, the Sunday night service would be the yeah, but. If you are lazy, this is music to your ears. I don't have to do anything. I'm limited, dude. Okay, first of all, work on that. Laziness isn't a limit given to you by God. It's a lack of engaging your responsibility. But for the whole rest of the room of us who are convinced we need to touch everything, do everything, all of it, you are limited. Rachel said this, and it's been, excuse me, my throat. Rachel said this year, and it's been in my pocket, just messing with my head. You said, God, Jesus can't heal who you want to be. He heals who we are. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. You know what, church? Yes, we have the victory, all the things we sing. And at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. And if all I'm doing is living in the victory that I feel like I have to well up myself, I'm not coming to him. Because me coming to him is like admitting full on that I'm not enough. And you know what? That's just not very maturing. Follower of Jesus, even baby steps, dipping your toe in the water. You're not enough. You'll never be enough. Which, in true paradox, doesn't undo the fact that God has uniquely placed you in the space he has placed you with the responsibilities he has given you, the little people that need you to feed them, to pay the bills, to point them to truth and to beauty. All of that is still true. And you're never enough. There is always one more question of why. It's why chat's so tempting to us. Because that first prompt is never going to go, you are a complete moron. Stop asking me questions. The response to the prompt is always, or at least until they change it, that's an amazing question. Well, yes, it is. God doesn't look at us and go, oh, my word, one more question. But what he does do is go, you know what? I'm working on that. Don't worry about it. Or at least that's what Ecclesiastes reminds us. You don't have to be everywhere. You don't have to know everything. You do not have to hold it all together. You don't have to hold it all together. And one of the other beauties in this, sorry, we're going to go a smidge extra. Sorry, not sorry. One of the beauties of gathering together with other followers of Jesus, this is that when you can't hold it together, someone next to you is going to help shore up. And so that burden that you can't carry alone, stop thinking you're a burden to someone else. There is a time and a season for everything. A time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to tear down, a time to build up, a time to plant, a time to harvest, a time to tear, a time to sow, a time to be a wreck, and a time to be strong for someone else. A time to admit our limit. A time to admit our limit. God has woven this into the plan. The new talk in our moment is whether or not immortality can come through technology. People are actually talking about it, uploading our thoughts, all of the things. This isn't a sign of the end of the age or the Antichrist or whatever. This was actually present at Babel. The people wanted to make a mark on the world and use the tech of their day, the brick. The temptation to be limitless is always there. What if we instead pivoted the other way and said, you know what, I'm just not going to do the 5th cup of coffee or take the Zyn or do any of the other things that our culture is looking at us going, if you do this, you can do more. You are not God. So have fuzzy thoughts. Forget things you shouldn't. Use the tools. But let's reject the lie of our moment that we can be without limit. This side of eternity, it doesn't exist. And the beauty of the paradox in that is Isaiah. Do you not know, have you not heard, the Lord is everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding nobody can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary, walk and not faint. Is it ever lost on us, or it shouldn't be? Very rarely does the Bible talk about the powerful. God's speaking to us, church. And so the space to sit as we shift to communion, what limit are you looking down the barrel of right now? Ecclesiastes ends with the teacher going, you're going to get older. Your eyes are going to go bad. Your teeth are going to wear out. Your body's not going to do what you want it to do. He pulls no punches. What limit are you facing? Is it your time? Is it your strength? Is it you just don't have the opportunity someone else does? Maybe it's a limit in your health. Maybe it's some emotional limitation. You can't go further. What would it look like if we didn't despise our limitations? What if we saw them through the lens of eternity? And what if we saw God placing them there, not to punish us, but to draw us closer? Lord, thank you for your designing of limits, for boundaries that remind us we are not you. God, I pray that you would teach us to see our weakness not as failure, but as an invitation, that we would rely on your strength. God, you know failure is failure. And in that failure, falling into sin or running toward sin, there's grace and there's mercy and there's forgiveness. But God, my weaknesses, they're different. May every limit in our lives, God, lead us deeper into worship and greater into trust. And may we find lasting life, true freedom in you, our Heavenly Father. Jesus, in your name we pray. Amen.